All right. Well, for those of you who are here, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76, my original channel. First of all, please like this stream, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. Give me 1 second here so I can look at this over on the YouTube side. As I woke up this morning, I set up this stream yesterday, and the question is always to simulcast to Facebook or not to simulcast to Facebook. And I think that's always a game time decision for me. But I think this is a universal message, and I think it applies to pretty much everybody with Father's Day coming up. So I think it's okay to stream over. It was okay to simulcast this one over to Facebook as well. If you're not, if you're on the YouTube side and you're not subscribed, and actually if you're over on the Facebook side, please subscribe to this channel. This is part 2 of a double header. I just did a stream over on my science channel discussing the story of how I earned my STEM degree as a minority. Once you do a stream or upload a video, sometimes that spawns ideas for other content. So I'll probably, there'll probably be other follow-up videos to that one over there. And just the long and short of it is that the how is important. It's one thing to say, we should get more minorities in the STEMs, but I think it's important to have people on the inside discussing how it was done and how challenging the process was and what the things are to look out for. Okay. So before I jump in, I don't intend to go along with this one. I think this is going to teach us something, but it's also, we'll also get a few laughs out of it as well. Recently, I've talked about how I've been rethinking my messaging on this channel and how I can best add value to the greater society. And I've also thought about the trailer that I made for this channel. If you haven't seen it, it's there. It's there in my catalog, and it's there for new subscribers. But in that trailer, I basically describe myself as a scientist, a writer, and a thinker. And I described that some of the messaging here on this channel or one of the content areas is money. So all of those things come together here. And so recently I've been reading, as a writer, I've been reading some of the writings from my blogging platform, which is what I'm going to do today. A couple of housekeeping issues and announcements. As you know, there are 4 Big Discussions 76 channels. There's a sports channel, a science and technology channel, and an entertainment and media channel. And in event that this channel gets taken down, because my science channel was briefly taken down, YouTube was gracious enough to allow it to go back up. You can also find me here. So that's the Big Words blog site up at the top. That second line is my email address that I set up specifically for my YouTube content. BigDiscuss76@bigwordsarepowerful.com. There's a Big Words blog site Facebook page, and that is my Twitter handle there, and that is my Instagram handle there. I'm always looking for more Instagram followers. And I just realized yesterday that doing reels where you have some music playing in the background and you're bobbing your head or whatever, those are pretty popular. So all of these social medias and these technologies, I'm still understanding and figuring out as I go along. There are some people here in the chat. C, what's going on, C? Thank you for coming through. Extended Clips, as always, thank you for your support. Let's Let's see, back to blessings at Dr. Anwar. Barry Little, that name sounds vaguely familiar. Thank you for coming through. Already liked and shared on my Twitter timeline. Thank you. Let's see. Extended Clip says, welcome to Barry Little. Extended Clip says, a Renaissance man. I think that's referring to me. I appreciate that. And Barry Little also says, what's good, Extended Clips? So a Renaissance man. Yeah, scientist, writer, thinker, and who has several content areas, one of them being money. So money. Where did I am a financial guy, so I'm always thinking about my personal finances. I budget. I've talked about that on this channel, but where did all that come from? Well, June brings with it Father's Day. And one of the people, let's see, C says, Doc, I really hope you and Curtis can link up soon via podcast. I'm happy for you. What would y'all discuss? Would anything come to mind? Well, C, so for those of you who don't know, let me slow down. For those of you who don't know, there's another gentleman who I look up to. I just submitted and published an essay on his new writing platform, Schoon TV. He's growing a presence here. He's created a documentary called Black, White, and Blue. Mr. Curtis Schoon, whom I look up to. C is a fan of his as well. And there might be a collaboration via YouTube between me and Curtis sometime soon, which I think is huge. And here C says, Doc, I really hope you and Curtis can link up soon via podcast. I'm happy for you. What would y'all discuss? Anything come to mind? Well, I think one thing we'd have to work out is if I would go to his panel, he's got more followers than I do. So that would, help grow my channel, or whether or not he would come over here. So the question is, who would interview whom? But I think we both have an interest in masculinity. I think we both have an interest in independent thought. So that could go any number of ways. I'm sure he'd be interested in hearing up with me being a Black male STEM professional. I'm sure he'd be interested in talking about that. So he and I would have to talk about that and figure it out. But I think those are some areas there. I think we're both independent thinkers. I think we're both critical thinkers. And I think we have interests in rescuing what's left of masculinity. So in this country. So there you go. Cannon Wilds says Father's Day every day. Okay. Yeah. All right. So many of me being a money guy, let me see if I have that slide queued up here. Financial literacy. Me being a money guy, having an interest in money, and now an interest in business and investing. Well, at least being interested in money, that came from my father. And money is all, as I will read to you guys in this essay, based upon my background, based upon how we grew up, money was always a concern. I'm not saying we were poor, but money was always a consideration in the background of everything. And something me and Dad always talked about was money. So with that, let's jump into the essay. It turns out that when I started my blogging platform, and this year will be the exception, I wrote Mother's Day and Father's Day essays pretty much every year prior to this year. I think I wrote a 2020 Father's Day essay. I know I wrote a 2020 Mother's Day essay. But this first Father's Day essay is from 2017, and it says reflections on some of Dad's money and life lessons. And so in this essay, I actually do reflect on some of the money lessons he taught me, and then some of the issues we faced, and then even some of the run-ins we had as I grew into adulthood. And I think that while this will be educational for those who read it and listen to this, it'll also be a little entertaining as well, because my writing style is not just to teach, but it's also to entertain. So with that, I will jump in and I'll wrap this one up. If there are folks hanging around at the end and someone wants to come in and say something about it, I'll drop the link in the chat. And this was 2017. So I know that there is at least one more Father's Day. There are two more Father's Day essays. So I'll probably read those before Father's Day. So, scientist, writer, thinker with numerous content areas of interest. Okay, so this reads as follows. And I wrote this back on June 15th of 2017. And I'm not a father myself. I'm part of the 53% of Black men who are never married and childless. So last month, I wrote a piece in celebration of Mother's Day. So it's only fitting that I write something in celebration of Father's Day as well. The Mother's Day post was about a specific piece of advice my mother gave me about my engagement and looming marriage a couple of years ago. As jokingly stated in that post, Dad didn't give me much advice in that particular instance. He did give me lots of guidance throughout my life, though. Over on my Heroes and Quotes page, his is the first quote, which was some advice he gave me at a young age about how to succeed academically. I looked at that prior to starting the stream, and I'm going to click to it so we can see it. So this is one of the most that's me a couple of years ago when I took pictures for the site. No gray beard, just a goatee, sitting in a Starbucks in Arlington, Virginia, reading the newspaper. Well, that's how I posed for the picture. Well, my dad's quote says, oh, there goes his government name. I don't think he'll mind. He's retired. No one really cares. His quote says, regarding your schoolwork, you don't want to do enough just to get by, son. You want to excel. So despite the fact that I'm Dr. Dunbar now, I wasn't always a good student. And me and my father actually had that conversation early. You don't want to do enough just to get by. You want to excel. And I figured that out in college. And that's how I got to the University of Michigan and got my PhD and et cetera, et cetera. So your parents' words matter. Okay. There was much more, though, particularly in way of advice about money, women, and other things. Lots about money and women. He sometimes consciously taught me things, and some things I learned simply from observation. So your children are watching what you do and what you don't do. With two of the key principles of my blog being creating ecosystems of success and empowering others, I'm going to reflect on some of his money lessons and some of their deeper and associated life meanings / significances, some of which I had to question as I got older. As in most cases, I didn't understand everything that was being said then as I do now. As I go through some of this stuff, keep in mind that fathers are important biological step or mentors of all sorts. According to data from Kids Count in 2015, 66% of African American kids were raised by a single parent, while the national average was 35%. Okay. This was back in 2017. I did not cite those stats. I'm learning that stats can be a controversial thing. And I did not cite that stat to demonize anyone. And I did not cite that stat to besmirch anyone. If you're watching this live or on the playback, it was just someone told me early on when I started writing that it's a good idea to anchor your writings, if possible, in statistics or some sort of known knowledge. So to kind of give it validity and grounding. So again, I didn't read those stats to demonize anyone, because the single parent, single mother, that's actually a very touchy subject, and it's a very controversial topic. So my parents divorced when I was 3 years old, and I thus grew up in a single parent household for the majority of my childhood. While I've sometimes looked back and wondered what it would have been like to have my father in the house, the blessing was that while he wasn't physically there, it was important for him to be as visible and accessible as possible. Always make sure your children know who you are. He tried hard to keep up with the words of his own father, who died during his teens. It sounds like a simple thing, but as I grew into adulthood myself, went through college and started dating, I realized that not every father did this, especially in the Black community. The results oftentimes were catastrophic, with long-lasting ramifications, especially in dating or pair bonding, a separate topic all in itself. That's discussed sometimes over on the Roger Report, in addition to other things. Okay, so here we go. Now, as I read my dad's quotes, I might actually go into his voice. And my dad has a very, very specific voice. And my brother says sometimes that I sound like my father, and people say that I look very similar to my father. So, you just did something I don't like. You didn't count your change. How do you know that the cashier gave you the correct change? And that's exactly how my father probably said that. And that's exactly how he enunciates things. Very, very distinct, very, very poignant. I was an early teen when this discussion took place. I had just paid for something, took the change the cashier gave me, and immediately stuffed it into my pocket. A stern man, his words, "You just did something I don't like," stopped me dead in my tracks. I didn't think he was paying attention, but sure enough, he was. In general, Dad was always paying attention to the most minute details, even when you thought he wasn't. He also remembered things long after you forgot about them, and would bring them up when you least expected it. When I discovered what he was unhappy about, it made sense to me, and I started counting my change every time. I even started calculating in my mind the change I was supposed to get back from cashiers before they gave it to me. The lesson here was to be careful with my money and to trust no one. Years later, he observed that I was, in fact, careful with my money. I told him that I had gotten the behavior from him. He replied, saying something very profound. "Well, son, when you have to make child support payments, you have to be very careful with your money. You always keep your receipt because you never know when you're going to have to return something." I don't know which came first, this lesson or the change counting lesson, but they weren't far apart. His father had gotten on him about this when he was younger. He had allegedly gone into Lower Manhattan to buy some underwear and returned home without the receipt, resulting in his getting scolded. So my dad is from Manhattan. I never met my paternal grandfather because he died when my father was 18. So he was long gone before I was born. When you get paid, you want to account for all your expenses. This was an early lesson on budgeting. We didn't sit down and do one right then and there, and I wouldn't master it until 10 years later, but I always remembered this discussion. You always want to pay yourself first. This lesson came shortly after I started working. Though again, as a teen, I didn't grasp the power of this advice until later. It had tremendous implications. Implications in one's prime earning years, where diligent individuals save for both emergencies and investments and build wealth while others spend all their income. You don't quit your job unless you have another one to go to. Dad gave me this sage wisdom between my junior and senior years of high school after quitting my very first job at the Denny's restaurant near the Buffalo Niagara International Airport. I lasted 3 months at that job, which consisted of washing dishes, cleaning up the restaurant, and taking out the garbage. I didn't last long enough to have to shovel snow in the winter. The place where I really wanted to work for my first job, the place I really wanted to work for my first job was McDonald's. At the time, it looked fun to me. I was happy to have the income, but for a while, I grew tired of working at Denny's, coming home sweaty, greasy, and exhausted. Without talking to anyone, I quit that job right there on the spot with no other job to go to. It was then that I came to the understanding that I had no more cash flow, a sign of immaturity. The only positive thing about that situation was that I was still in high school, wasn't required to contribute to any of my mother's household bills, and I wasn't required to contribute to her household bills. Some adults quit their job without having a replacement and put themselves in a pickle, often burdening those around them. You always keep money in the bank because you never know when an emergency is going to arise. There's a very funny story behind this lesson, and it involves a woman. Something very dramatic and stressful, according to Dad. For my own safety, though, I'll just stick to the lesson. At an early age, Dad stressed the importance of having money in the bank due to unforeseen emergencies, which inevitably happen to you or to someone around you. In this particular quagmire he had gotten into, having some money in the bank helped him get out of it. He also regretted not having $5,000 available for a mortgage down payment on a house he was renting. He's lamented that several times, not being able to buy that house. I just mentioned this on the Roger Report yesterday. You can keep dating her if you want to. You might have to miss an electric bill, though. This sobering advice came during my first year in graduate school in my mid-20s. It was one of my first experiences learning something that Dad talked about for most of my childhood: women and money. At least most of the ones we knew came with a price tag and wanted to be wined and dined. Dad talked about that a lot. Women are all about the money. I had unfortunately taken a liking to someone whom I dated for 1 to 2 months, who openly admitted she was needy, which I didn't understand at the time, as she had already started her own career. Inexperienced at dating, she grew frustrated with my meager finances and my lack of understanding of what she expected of me. Dad's advice here, which came in a hurtful and mocking tone, was simply communicating that I needed to determine whether or not I could afford this particular female. I decided that I couldn't. It's an important set of questions for all men to ask themselves when meeting a potential partner. Can I afford her? Does she line up with my priorities? Will she tank my finances? This was also one of the first times I could personally feel the pain, the scars, and the poor fortune my father experienced in the dating jungle after he and my mother split, as there was lots of despair and little hope of encouragement in his words. I'm going to take a brief break and look at the comment section. Okay, well, looks like a lot of the guys are here. Extended clips. C says, I used to work at Denny's in the Falls at the Holiday Inn before the casino tore it down. Dishwasher sucked. Yep, it's my first job. But when you're the dishwasher at Denny's, you get sweaty, you get hot, oily, and it gets, yeah, it's a rough job. But when you work at McDonald's, it's the same way. You come home smelling like grease and fried beef and all kinds of things. Sheet is here. C says, okay, this is C saying this. Women and cats will take your money, Doc. That's what my father and grandfather always told me. Interesting. Cars, not cats. Okay. Going back to the essay. Okay. When you have to make child support payments, it forces you to be very careful with your money. I have to be careful here, as this is a sensitive topic, and my mother generally proofreads my articles. Throughout my childhood, Dad sometimes lamented about making child support payments, not because he didn't want to support his children, but because I think he had a hard time making ends meet on his own end. During my childhood, he eventually took a second job in the military to pay the bills. It's a sensitive topic because while he felt maxed out, my mother felt as though he wasn't doing enough. And I'll stop there. But suffice it to say that in many instances, men and women see money and life differently. Let me read that again. In many instances, men and women see money and life differently. In some instances, as the ones being asked to provide, it can seem like your best is never enough, which is a hard pill to swallow. He and I talked about this a lot as I got older, and I started experiencing my own scrapes and bruises with the opposite sex. The bank is going to want to look at all your bank statements when you apply for a mortgage, and $2,000 isn't any money. Dad scoffed at me, making me feel 5 feet tall. I was still living with the big guy during my postdoctoral fellowship. I started reading Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad series and had joined my local real estate investment club. I wanted to make an ambitious move and get my first investment property, a duplex, which I would live in and eventually rent out for passive income. I needed some help with the closing costs and associated expenses, so I asked him for a loan. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. Instead of a nice, teachable discussion about the ups, the downs, and the ins and outs of trying such a thing, it turned into him putting me in a proverbial headlock. It dragged on for days and days as he mulled it over and asked me random, pointed questions about it, his analysis, and communication styles. After a while, I just wanted to drop the whole thing, and I concluded that I never wanted to be in position to ask for his help for anything money related, though I did once more and returned to the same conclusion. I'm almost done, guys. In hindsight, while it was smart to want to create a passive income stream, it wasn't a good idea in that particular instance. I wasn't going to stay in that area long term, and I wasn't experienced enough and didn't have enough money to manage a property from a long distance. What was funny was that many people don't have many people don't even have $2,000 in the bank they can access quickly. That said, he was right in that it wasn't a substantial amount of money. He was also right in that prior to qualifying for a mortgage, The banks do want to know everything about your financial history. Dad was also jaded in terms of being a landlord from a prior experience, as he once had a tenant in his lower unit, an older woman. According to him, according to him, he went downstairs to collect the rent one day, and the woman transformed into a malevolent, ominous, and demon-possessed state. It scared him at the time and forever soured him on being a landlord. Yeah, I think the way he tells the story, she kind of went back into a trance like this, and kind of went into this otherworldly place. It's much funnier when he tells the story. I wouldn't invest in the stock market if I were you. This bit of advice was given to me in my 30s when I expressed that I wanted to buy some stock by the end of that particular year. Because of his own life experiences, Dad was averse to losing money. Coincidentally, one of our closest cousins recommended I get in the game and buy stock. And even today, experts like Dr. Boyce Watkins strongly advocate Blacks getting into the stock market. So who was right in this case? Who was to be believed and trusted? This gets back to one of the points I made in my 2017 Mother's Day post. As we grow into adulthood, I think we all get to a point where everything our parents tells us can't be taken as the gospel. Can't be taken as the gospel, and in some instances, we must be questioned and pondered critically. In this particular instance, yes, investing in stocks does involve potential loss. An important consideration going in, though, is whether or not you understand there is potential for the loss and whether or not you can absorb the loss. In other words, do you have an emergency fund in the bank, and is the amount invested allocated for that reason? Can it be replaced for another round? This is much different. This is a much different thought process than simply saying you're going to lose money if you do that. Okay, guys, we're toward the end here. If the tone of this blog post was in part melancholy and mixed, then it reflects our father-son relationship, which has been full of contradictions and mystery over the years. When I look back at my youth and many of my childhood experiences, many were marked by concerns over money. I'm not saying that I grew up in poverty, because I didn't by any means. I don't really remember my mother, whom I spent the majority of my childhood with, talking about money a lot, but I think she shielded my brother and me from some things, sheltering us, as one of my aunts often said. I did look around at peers, such as my best friend, and realized that I didn't have Air Jordans, starter jackets, Karl Kani, or any of the trendiest apparel of our cohort. Most of the money-related talks as I grew up actually came from my father. And as you might have gathered from this post, many of them had some sort of pain associated with them. As I've gotten older, I understand things much better now. As we get older, we start to see that our parents are people who make mistakes themselves and are not perfect, though at one point we may have thought they were. In some instances, we start to understand their pains and struggles. Over the years, our father-son relationship has gone through a lot of changes, some good and some bad, with multiple ups and downs. Overall, I'm grateful for everything my father has done for me, and I tell him that every time I see him now. My mother, too. That being said, as I think President Obama said years ago, for children whose biological fathers are missing, there can be other fathers too. And even if a child's father isn't a good one or can't supply everything needed, there can, again, be other fathers to fill in those gaps. I certainly have many. And then finally, there are a lot of podcasts and men's stations on places like YouTube these days, many talking about the importance of fathers. My favorite in this current station of my life is Paul Elam's A Voice for Men. Content I would recommend for any man still trying to figure things out in our society, personal values, dating and marriage, and finally gender/societal roles. Fathers are very important, if for no other reason than to lend a balanced perspective on the world. This is true for both boys and girls who themselves will eventually grow into men and women. So that's it. By the way, Paul Elam, A Voice for Men, I think he got deplatformed because of some of the things that he was talking about. I did submit 2 or 3 essays over there, but I've lost track of what's happening with A Voice for Men. But I think Paul Elam saw this essay, and I think because I shared with him that I mentioned him, and he re-uploaded this essay over on A Voice for Men, and then I wrote 2 more for him. So yeah, he got deplatformed over here on YouTube, and I think he got banned from Twitter. I'm not saying I'm not saying what he was saying was bad. I just think in today's climate, his messages about masculinity were not and are not welcome everywhere. So C says, I want to thank Barry Little for the super chat. Thank you, sir. And let's see. C says, excellent peace doc. Thank you. Thank you. All those lessons weren't easy, but they were good lessons. And I wrote a follow-up financial piece about Dad's financial messages and teachings last year. I did. So I'm going to read that before Father's Day, similar to this one. I'm going to throw the link in the chat. If someone wants to come up and say a few words, maybe about your father, maybe about a lesson your father did or did not teach you about money, or maybe something you didn't know. There are a lot of kids who weren't, for example, taught about credit early on, and they paid for it later. I think my parents did teach me about credit and credit scores and how not to go crazy with credit cards. But I also remember my father giving me a credit card. It might have been when I went away to college, and he said, use this only in emergency. Based upon what I know now, I don't agree with that. As many of you know, I was involved with Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. And a basic teaching of Financial Peace University is you take the time to build up enough cash so that you don't have to use a credit card. But Dad was well-intentioned when he said that, as are most parents in terms of being well-intentioned when they tell you things. I'm going to read this comment by C. C said, it's interesting. You said you thank your parents every time you see them for how they raised you. Looking back at my childhood now, it makes me appreciate my parents as you view them too. Yeah. And, the other thing is, parents aren't, not being one right now. Parents are people, they make mistakes. They can only teach you what they know. I've done a lot of, especially when I stumbled upon the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series. One of the things I found myself asking myself after starting to read those books is, why didn't anyone say anything about this earlier? Why didn't my folks teach me anything about passive income or investing in the stock market, or even getting out of the rat race and onto the fast track, out of the rat race onto the fast track. If you read the Rich Dad Poor Dad series, those are buzzwords and terms that Robert discusses quite a bit in the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. And the reason my parents didn't teach me anything about passive income, buying real estate, becoming wealthy, becoming rich, is because the reality is all they knew was the rat race. And all their parents knew was the rat race. So they can't teach you if they don't know themselves. So that's some, and so as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that life is a bit of a marathon. It's a bit of a race, and everybody has a different start. Not all of our starts are the same. And part of the key is not being discouraged by the fact that you don't have the same start of that kid over in Orchard Park, or I think you live in one of the suburbs like Lancaster or Cheektowaga. You might not have the start that those kids have, but there are ways in which you can catch up. If you're smart, if you're diligent, if you know how to read, and you know how to ask questions, and you find the right mentors, there are ways that you can catch up with those kids who had things that you didn't have. C says, so Canon Wild says, an ear for men. Okay. I think his website, I think here on YouTube, I think Paul's platform was an ear for men, and his actual written website is a voice for men. And an ear for men got deplatformed. So all the censorship we're seeing today, this was starting years ago. C says, being a father myself, I see now the struggles and pains my parents went through to provide for me, my two brothers, and two sisters. I actually feel terrible for how I treated them at times. Yeah, as a youngster, I'm sorry. I've been speaking for about 2 hours. As a youngster, you definitely don't understand everything that's going on. And it's not until you become adult yourself and start to get some perspective that you start to, and maybe go through some of the same things yourself. It's then that you start to understand. C says, well, finance is a lost art. They used to teach finance in school. At least in my school days in the 90s, I guess they did away with that in today's society. See, I remember at Hutch Tech, for those of you outside of Western New York, C knows what this is. I went to Hutch Tech. That's our building. I just showed this in the live stream over on my science channel. But at Hutch Tech, I remember us taking an accounting class and learning about debits and credits. I don't really remember anything else. And as a senior, I remember it was dry, and I didn't really understand the application of learning about those debits and credits. So it just kind of went like this. And that's the extent of it. But I don't remember learning about anything else, at least not to the extent that Robert Kiyosaki wrote about it and taught about it in the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. C says, yuppers, Lancaster, I busted my ass to have the life I have now. Okay, that's a topic all in itself. I busted my ass too. C also says, crazy to think I used to live on Main Street in Summer Best in downtown Buffalo for 7-ish years. And now I have a nice house in the burbs. Yeah. Okay. I was thinking about, give me a second. I was thinking about reading another piece, because There's a name or a term that, geez, I might get in trouble for saying this. Some people had associated with my father, and also some people have associated with me. I was thinking about reading this piece, but I think, with me wanting to go in this direction on the channel, more discussing more of my writings and how they relate to everyday life, and also discussing money, I think this will be worth discussing in its own live stream. I'm gonna show you guys another piece that I wrote, and some of you guys will probably laugh at this as well. But this brings to this discussion about my father and his money lessons. Where is it? I know that it's here. Oh, I know where it is. There are two other words that get thrown around when you're talking about money and being careful with money, and being very careful with how you spend your money. Can you guys guess what those two words are before I bring it up? Let's stop the screen share. Okay, before I bring the other piece up, I'm going to return this text, and I'll see if any of you guys can think of the two words I'm talking about that are normally associated with people who are careful with their money and methodical with their money. Herb says disposable and discretionary income. Nope, those aren't the words. Artisan, how did you know? How did you know? So those are the two words right there. Cheap or frugal. I feel like either Artisan might have that might be a really good guess, or he might have heard me talk about this before. But two words, yeah, associated. Well, one word associated with dad. Dad. I'll keep it interesting for now. Dad. One of these words was associated with dad, and both of these words, at one point, were associated with me. So I'm proud of. Well, I'll just say, and we'll do this in a separate stream, since we're going to explore the money a little bit more. Some people are proud of being labeled with these two words, either of these two words, and that was a surprise to me, because after it was one of my exes called me cheap, and I was hurt by that, because my finances weren't in control. I didn't have control over my finances at that time. And as a man, you want to feel like you're taking care of things. And when your woman calls you cheap, that could be a major blow to you. And a coworker, actually, around that time, he was proud of being cheap. And years before that, someone said, "Oh, you're very frugal." And depending upon who you talk to, the words can have very different meanings. But I think for me, at the end of the day, I would rather have a level of independence, and should an unforeseen emergency arise, which in life they often do, I would rather have money in the bank and not have to go bother anybody, like friends or relatives. I'd rather be able to take care of it myself, than having to go bother someone else. And so that if you're doing it off of one paycheck, that means you have to make certain budgetary decisions, and you have to make some sacrifices. And some people will call you names because you're going without certain things, or maybe you're not jet setting all over the place. So we will revisit this in another stream. And on my mother's side, that term has been associated with I'll keep it general. That term, because if any of them are watching, because I'm simulcasting this to Facebook as well, that term cheap has been associated with one of my mother's siblings, and I won't say who it is. So, but it's a funny topic, and these are words that are thrown around quite a bit at each other. Let's see. I'm going to go for about another 10 minutes. I did drop the link in the chat. I'll do it one more time in case someone wants to come up. But if not, I'm going to wrap this one up because this is part 2 of a double header today. Let's see how many likes I have. Yeah, I got 11 likes. That's cool. I don't have a large crowd for this one. Let's see, I'm not seeing the 3 signal bars. Why does my image look like that on YouTube? For my YouTube, I look kind of fuzzy. Anyway, some of the comments. Yuppers, Lancaster. Very Little says, at sea, teacher Robbieism and other such ideologies are considered more important than teaching financial literacy, unfortunately. Let me look at this. Why is that doing that? Yep, still looks. There, that looks better. I'm gonna at some point I'm gonna upgrade my setup here. See, so before, if I do something with Curtis, I won't do it until I upgrade my camera and those kinds of things. Because right now I'm using the camera on the PC, and I think it's time to upgrade. C says, if you ever come back to Western New York, Doc, I'll have to have you over for some barbecue. We got to link up. Yeah, see, I've seen some of the food you've prepared for your boys. Absolutely, absolutely. Artisan Mike says, salute at Dr. Anwar in the chat. Herb says, disposable and discretionary income. Those are 2 types of income. Extended Clip says 100. I'm not sure what that's referring to. C says frugalist. Is that the origin of the word frugal? Artisan guessed it right. Cheap or frugal. I see I don't have a big crowd here, but I see the viewers coming in. If you come in, please hit the like button. That would help a whole lot. Artisan says self or selfish. Yeah. When you're making your money and people don't like what you're doing, or they feel like you're not helping out the family enough, people can call you selfish, and they might call you selfish. So that's definitely a word that's mixed in with cheap or frugal. Artisan Mike says, I'm a father, elbow bump. I'm a father. Aquateki, yep, cheapskate. Yep. That's something that gets thrown around. Though I will say this, Dave Ramsey, and I know Dave Ramsey got himself into hot water, around Christmas for some of the things that are happening now, which I won't go into. But one of the teachings of Financial Peace University is actually generosity. So for all of his detractors who don't like him being conservative, one of his teachings is actually being generous. I mean, even if you're not a churchgoer and a tither, he encourages generosity somehow, whether it's giving money to Well, he encourages generosity. And for those of you, I'm going to mention one more controversial name, but probably for reasons you might not expect. Kevin Samuels. He encouraged generosity. Particularly, I did go to one of his events. I'm thinking about doing a stream talking about him and my experience, but I don't know, because that's kind of radioactive. But the net of it is, as he says, is that one of the things he encouraged during that gathering I went to was to always think about being generous, always think about bringing something for the group. And when he talks about the high value man thing, apparently when those types of men get together, they're all arguing over who's going to pay the bill. So a lot of people teach generosity, and I try to be generous these days. That's something that I try to do. But you have to be in a position where you can afford to be generous. Okay. So this might be controversial as well. A mentor told it to me, and I'm sure those of you watching this live or on the playback have heard this as well. And I'd never heard this before. And the saying says, the best way to help the poor is not to become one of them. So let's see. Artisan Mike says, C says, what's up with your boy LeBum, Doc? What happened? Hey, man, I was thinking about doing a live stream today over my sports channel, talking about both of the LA teams getting eliminated, but the Clippers seem to keep being able to resurrect themselves from the dead. So I'll probably do a basketball live stream on my sports channel once the Clippers Mavericks series is decided, so that all the teams will have advanced into the semifinal round. But hey, to answer your question, the Lakers, as much as I tease one of my buddies about them, and as much as I tease the Laker Nation, they had injuries. They did not have a lot of time to recover from the bubble season. LeBron was not 100%. AD couldn't last a game, and the rest of the supporting cast didn't give them what they needed. So, it is what it is. Artisan Mike says, I got you, Doc. Artisan Mike says, because they feel entitled to your success because you are related. Herb says, leading with your wallet. I think we're going back to the generosity thing here. And then Herb says, BAG, bold, ambitious, generous. When I was in college, I would make it a point to pick up a dinner tab at least once. Okay. All right. Well, guys, we are up on an hour. That is my 2017 Father's Day essay / blog post. And if there was a 2020 last year, then there surely was a 2018 and there was a 2018 and a 2019 blog post as well, both of which I'll probably cover in live streams. I know one of them involves blue collar and white collar careers. Yeah, I think the 2018 piece involves blue collar, white collar careers, because my father wanted oh boy, is this true? Herb, what's good? Hey Doc, Herb and I used to work at Denny's together. Wow. Yeah, Herb is a Niagara Falls guy. But Dad wanted my brother to be his doctor, his medical doctor, and he wanted me to be his lawyer. So my dad wanted both me and my brother to pursue white collar careers. Well, what we know now is that white collar careers, oftentimes you have to go into debt for those. You have to go into debt unless you get lucky and get scholarships, all scholarships for medical school. You have to go into debt for those. If you go to become a lawyer, we know that lawyers must go into debt. And I think that back in the day, for those boomers, especially those Black boomers, our parents, they were looking at, okay, we want our children to go ahead and become high earning professionals. Okay. And what we know now, at least the way things have evolved, is that high income professionals, they have to go to school for a while. They have to go in debt to get those careers. And then a challenge on the back end is paying that debt off. That's something I kind of learned more about by playing Cash Flow 101 and reading the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books. And there are a lot of high income professionals who look like they're living a good life, but they're actually struggling. And so what I went on to learn is that many of the blue collar professionals, they're able to make large sums of money without as much schooling. So there's a bit of a misunderstanding of how all of these things work. You know, obviously getting a college degree, it's more favorably looked upon. It's more well received and perceived in certain circles. But again, the blue collar guys, the electricians, the contractors, the plumbers, mechanics, they don't have to go to school for as long as someone like me. And I was lucky that I went into the research route. I got into Michigan and I didn't have to pay for graduate school. But there are other high income earners, high income professionals. They make 100,000, 200,000, but they have to pay back 100,000 as well. So I will probably revisit that and discuss that in another stream. And I was thinking the other day, I'm interested in propping up some of the blue collar workers. I think that, you know, Charles has come on and we've discussed the Great Faulkner Initiative. I think we need to shine the light on the blue collar workers some more, because even during the pandemic, those individuals were still working, because we can't live without the blue collar workers. They build everything, they fix everything. The nice air conditioned building that I work in and that the doctors perform their surgeries in, all of those are made possible because of the blue collar workers. So if you're a blue collar worker out there, I was going to put it on my community tab. If you're a blue collar worker out there and you want to come on and talk about your career and what you do and the advantages of your career, I think I want to at some point have a panel of blue collar workers, because that was not encouraged when I was growing up, because my folks wanted us to pursue the white collar careers. So I was not encouraged to go to Burgard. My uncle went to Burgard. For those of you from Buffalo, you know about Burgard and Seneca. And I think McKinley was a vocational high school, but it was white collar. Go the white collar route, go to college. And again, I'm not saying it was for what they knew that made sense. And at that time, it probably made sense. Get into corporate, get into the government, get a white collar career. But the blue collar people, as we just saw over the last year and a half, even when there's a pandemic, you're still going to need the plumbing. You're still going to need electricity. You're still going to need the infrastructure. So I think I want to help use this channel to advance knowledge of those people and those professionals and those careers. I'm going to read a few more comments and I'm going to stop because my throat's getting a little sore and I want to, maybe I'll go binge watch Snowfall some more. Let's see. Herb says, no, C says, good to see you, Herb. I'd drop my contact information, but I don't know how to do private messages on YouTube. If you guys want, I can be the conduit for exchanging information. Herb, I don't know if you're on Twitter, but that's how I met C. I met him on Twitter, actually. Artisan Mike says, facts. Collars struggles too. Taxes eat you up, especially in California. I think Artisan's talking about white collar individuals. Artisan Mike says, facts. Blue collar struggles too. Okay, taxes eat you up, especially in California. Extended Clip says, gives me a fist. Blue collar built the country. Yep. They build the buildings. They lay the train tracks. They build the runways. They lay the infrastructure so we can have this internet. Artisan Mike, yeah, reach out to me. This email, it's long. I had to create something unique, but shoot me an email here, bigdiscuss76@bigwordsarepowerful.com. I know that's a mouthful, but I'd be interested in having some of the blue collar guys come up and talk about their training and what their lifestyle is like and the advantages of pursuing those careers, because college isn't the only way, and college isn't for everybody. Extended Clip says, I'll be there, Doctor, God willing. Dr. Anwar, he says, applause to Aquateki. Barry Little says, a blue collar stream will be awesome. Looking back, if I had a choice between blue collar and white collar, I would choose blue collar. Interesting. Yeah, the debt, as we're seeing now, the debt is huge. And there are a lot of youngsters, the only message they're being taught is to go to college. And there's nothing wrong with going to college as long as there are jobs in the economy waiting for that degree that you're pursuing. That's something else my mentor taught me, is that it's the economy that dictates who gets hired. So it's incumbent upon those young people going into school to have some idea of what the economy needs, not necessarily what you want to study per se, but if you want a job on the back end, you have to think about what the economy wants. So for those interested, let's think about having a live stream on the blue collar careers, just dedicated to the Blue Henrys, as Kevin calls them. The Blue Henrys, who make our country go and who make our country run. Okay, let's see. Not yet. Toya said Dr. Dunbar is a fine conduit indeed. Oh, thank you, Toya. Artisan Mike says Dr. Dunbar, BGS. Okay, I'll go through BGS. Another conduit, probably the biggest of all the conduits. And then Aquateki says salute at Extended Clips at Artisan Mike. All right, everyone, I'm going to stop this here. Herb says excellent idea. See, we have buy-in already from the big bad wolf. I think if I didn't thank you, Aquateki, thank you for the Cash App. All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Tomorrow, Alonzo Halls come through. If you need some financial consultation, contact Alonzo. Maybe at some point, with me trying to drive the channel more into some financial areas, at some point, me and Alonzo, maybe we can collaborate on something over here. I know you have your own space. So, on this channel tomorrow, I'm going to take it back to Buffalo once again for anyone interested. And I'm going to have a discussion with a gentleman who some of you may have seen pass through my chat at some point, named Doug Ruffin, and he has a channel. He is a media individual from Buffalo, and he has a channel, I believe, called Urban Legacy Filmworks, and he recently launched a channel called the Buffalo History Channel. So we've been talking behind the scenes quite a bit. I've been saying, Doug, we need to collaborate. We need to do something. Well, I finally got him, and I'm going to interview Doug Ruffin tomorrow, talking about his career in media and also about his 2 YouTube channels. So that's going to be exciting. So, all right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. There'll be more Father's Day blog posts, Father's Day streams coming, as I have 3 more blog posts to read. If you're watching on the playback, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe as well. As always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. All right. Bye-bye.